I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Hornady Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Seth. Thanks for tuning in on this episode. And on this episode, March 8th, 0308, the 308, we're going to talk about America's cartridge, the 6.5 Creedmoor. Nah, I'm just kidding. We got to talk about the 308, the 308 Winchester and all of its legacy. And to do so, a familiar face and voice across the table, project engineer Miles Neville. And then beside him, a new face, a new voice, but an incredible depth of knowledge here, all things Hornady and all things shooting. We have the lead ballistics lab technician, Matt George. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
No trouble.
Thanks.
Yes, so like I alluded to, we got to talk about the 308. And jokingly, I had to make a reference to the 6.5 Creedmoor because that's, I feel like there are 800 different articles about 6.5 Creedmoor versus 308. Well, they're all great, and the 308's great for a lot of reasons. So I wanted to get you guys on here just to shoot the breeze about the 308 Winchester. Let's take a little bit of a dive. Let's look at some of its history, some of its development, what its use case was, what it's used for currently, maybe what we've all used it for, because quite frankly, for me, my first introduction to long-range shooting, which quickly became, my passion in life, was with the 308 Winchester. So, to rewind it, how far back do we have to go to start looking at what became the 308 Winchester?
You look far back, pretty much every great cartridge usually has an origin of the military.
Yeah.
So the military, they're pretty fixed on what they use. So the 308 was all stemmed from World War II. The end of World War II, we had pretty much Europe destroyed, all these countries just beat up by years and years of battle.
Right.
So what we moved on to was you have all these treaties that are signed by all these different nations that you have the Allies, they're forming their treaties, they're just kind of grouped together saying, we're never going to let this happen again.
Yeah, good plan.
Yep, ideally. And it's kind of the same thing. Going back to World War I, they had these same sort of mutual assistance type things, what they did. Well, what came out of World War II was NATO. You hear NATO a lot when you look at bullet calibers, different cartridges. You have the 9mm NATO, you have the 5.56, you have the 308, which is then the 7.62. What that is, that's just a way of all these countries coming together, but having one standardized cartridge. So our ammunition will fit in their rifles can work with our ammunition.
Now that makes sense.
Yep, and that's more than small arms ammunition. That's everything. Just from our bombs will fit on your plane to our electrical plugs will fit into your tank, stuff like that.
Whoa, gets deep.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
that was more than I was expecting.
Yep, it's all based off these things called STANAGs. These are standardization agreements. So you have all these countries that they say, hey, look at this. We'll consider this for adoption. So after World War II, you have all these countries that are saying, hey, let's look at these, let's develop this, and see if we can find a cartridge that everybody's going to be happy with.
Yeah.
So immediately following World War II, we had the 30-06. It's the storied 30-06.
Yeah. Now that, I guess you could call America's cartridge.
Yep. You had the M1 Garand, which America had used since, developed in the 30s, clipped in 1945. But by the end of 1945, it's starting to get a little long in the tooth. It's a big, long rifle, 24-inch barrel.
Heavy recoil.
And it's just a big round of ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
You look at what came out at the end of World War II. You'd have stuff like the SDG-44. You'd have these, the birth of the assault rifle. You find, in big open terrain, the M1 Garand's great, but you get into these close combat or close quarters type situations, and clearing cities and towns. A big long rifle is not ideal.
Right.
So that was kind of the birth of the intermediate cartridge.
Yeah.
So looking into the intermediate cartridges, the British developed the 280 British, a 7mm thing, which was just kind of, if you look at it, it's like, you look at it, that's a nice modern looking cartridge. The 30-06, it's really long, but, let's scale this down a little bit. That way you have a smaller cartridge, you can have a smaller rifle.
Right. And the 300 Savage was out at this time as well already.
And the 300 Savage, it came out in about, I want to say the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
The 300 Savage, it's a good cartridge. We've loaded it in the past, and it's I think one of the first guns that it came out with was like the Savage 99.
Right.
But we also have, in our own lab, we have a Remington Model 8. which is a neat little semi-automatic
Yeah,
Browning design.
Probably one of the
Mhm.
first commercially available
Yep.
semi-automatic sporting rifles.
Yep, and it's a great cartridge for a semi-automatic rifle, but it's really not much more powerful than a 30-30. It's maybe 200 feet per second faster.
Okay, so we needed to bridge that
Mhm.
gap between 30-06
Mhm.
and 30-30.
Yep. You need to bring in new technology. So 30-06, being developed, for the M1 Garand, it even stems back to World War I, where you have just, a lot of guys shooting these big, long rifles and expected to shoot, 1,000 yards maybe. It's not likely ever going to happen in battle.
Right. Certainly not in those times.
Yeah. There's a lot of that late 1800s, early 1900s theory that military rifles were going to have engagements out to 2,000 meters, and you see it on the sights. All the sights are calibrated for these ridiculous yard lines, and then it turns out everybody fights at like 300 yards, and then
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in looking at these new cartridges and new weapon designs, you had the British with the 280 British, and then the Americans brought out, something based off of the 300 Savage, which it more or less turned into just be a shortened 30-06 is what they ended up doing. Pretty much all they did was cut the thing about a half-inch shorter. The case is almost a half-inch shorter, then they just shortened up the ogive on the bullet a little bit.
To make it work.
And instead of having a 3.4 inch or
3.340.
3.340 inch long rifle cartridge, they now have a almost intermediate 2.800 inch long cartridge.
That sounds like kind of an ideal sweet spot.
Mhm.
And stuck with 30 caliber.
30 caliber. You got the Army Ordnance. I mean, they're stuck in tradition. They're big on 30 caliber.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we've kind of already had that complex, that the war complex going, making 30 caliber bullets. So, and obviously they're effective. So probably no reason to go away from that, which makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that was post World War II, and we see that development for the military. When did this become available to the you and me of the era?
Yep. So you have NATO finally adopted this cartridge. They decided, hey, if the U.S. is going with this cartridge, we need to go with what the U.S. is doing. So that would have been about 1954, I do believe, is when NATO adopted the 7.62. But a few years previously, in 1952, Winchester brought it to the commercial market.
Oh, so it was commercially available before it was adopted by NATO.
Yep.
That's interesting.
A great part about developing a cartridge, even if you're doing it for the military, is you can look at a commercial side of things. How can we advance this for what the military needs, and then maybe go a little beyond that for different applications in the commercial market.
That's interesting. So I wonder if that clouded anything up at the time, because now we're faced with 7.62 by 51 versus 308 Winchester. And what's the difference there? And yeah, maybe we should, I don't know what your plan of attack here is, but maybe that's a good time to bring that up, because if the commercial market was using the cartridge in 1952, what happened between 1952 and 1954 as far as development goes?
As far as developing it into a sporting cartridge, you're not anymore limited to the military rifles. So military rifles, they're semi-automatic rifles, they're fully automatic machine guns, and they take a lot of wear and tear. So they establish a maximum loading pressure that you're only gonna, you're not gonna exceed this for reasons of both just wear and tear on the weapons, and then you have climatic conditioning where you need to give yourself a little bit of a buffer between a cold temperature and then a really hot temperature, and make sure that in a hot gun, you're not going to shoot hot ammunition and then have a whole bunch of issues there.
Yep.
So it's kind of limited a little bit more than what you would end up with a commercial line ammo, which you can take a sporting cartridge and you can really boost performance to get a little bit longer range out of it, a little more energy.
That makes sense. So all things equal, juice up the pressure just a little bit, still certainly within reasonable limits, but just a little bit more compared to what the military is going to load things. So what does that look like for us today?
Numbers-wise, with the 7.62 NATO ammunition, especially like the M80 ball, which is about the most popular and the most commonly found load for the 7.62 NATO, that's usually about 55,000 PSI is the loading limit on that one. You're not usually going to run up to that pressure limit. You want to give that buffer for the hot and cold temp requirements.
Yeah, right.
When you get into the Sporting Arms and Ammunition Manufacturers Institutes, when they standard things through their ANSI standardizations, what they're doing is they're going to say, you know what, most guys are going to shoot this stuff at roughly around 70 degrees, maybe not plus or minus more than about 25 degrees. So let's give them a little bit more room on pressure. With SAMI, what you end up with is you get to boost that pressure limit up to about 62,000 pounds.
Mm.
And you can gain almost 200 feet per second just by increasing the limit
7,000
on the
pounds
pressure.
of pressure.
Mhm.
Wow.
And the other thing is where we're not stuck making a M60 or an M14 or an M240 gas system. We're not stuck with powders that limit us, and we're not stuck with one bullet weight. So
Right.
there's a whole list of other powders that are available on the commercial side that can get maybe more velocity than what you would see from what the type of powder you'd load into M80.
Interesting. So from a chamber pressure, there was obviously a difference at the time. From a dimension standpoint, tolerances on lengths and diameters, was there any meaningful differences there?
Headspace on those two cartridges is nearly identical. A max spec on NATO is the headspace spec on a SAMI spec chamber.
Okay.
So there's not a whole lot of difference there. Maybe a little bit tighter chamber on that 7.62, but they could always cut them deeper. You just kind of got to know what you got.
Yeah.
So as far as shooting a 308 Winchester round in a 7.62 NATO chamber, you're more or less good to go. The thing that kind of saves you, which is the same thing between, you have the controversy of the 223 Remington and the 5.56 millimeter,
Right.
is the 5.56 has that longer throat, a little bit more, free bore, a little bit more lead into the rifling. You get the same thing with the 7.62 NATO. The 7.62 actually has more free bore, almost 100 thousandths of an inch.
Oh, wow.
Before you get the commencement of the rifling. So you actually do get a little bit where the bullet's just kind of free floating and
Bouncing
then
around
forces
in
engraves in the rifling. So that kind of, you're never really going to encounter a 62,000 PSI 308 Winchester commercial load, but on the off chance that you do, you're more or less safe to shoot it in a gun that's spec for 7.62 NATO.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, but the pressure limit is definitely something to be noted. And again, 200 feet per second with 7,000 pounds of max average pressure. And like you'd mentioned, Matt, and I know you see this firsthand in the lab, we never load anything to the max average pressure.
Mhm.
We always give ourselves and the consumer a little bit of a buffer.
Yep.
So you said Winchester brought this to market commercially in 1952. It had to be in the Model 70.
Oh,
Were they
absolutely.
both- yeah,
Yep.
I mean, probably that. So, yeah, if you're looking
Mhm.
for an iconic piece of history, a classic Model 70 in 308 Winchester. And really, as far as commercial use goes, anything you want to shoot with it that you would shoot with the 30-06, really.
Mhm.
So the deer, the elk, the antelope, such a versatile cartridge. And then you just get rid of some of that recoil from, basically less powder, essentially,
yeah,
compared to
yeah.
30-06.
And that was the goal with the 7.62 NATO, was to match the ballistics of the 30-06, but with a cartridge that was a half inch shorter by using modern propellant technology.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
win-win all the way around.
Yeah, they're pretty close. I think like a modern 30-06, you might get a little bit. You'll get a
Mhm. Yeah,
boost in
yeah.
bullet
Yeah.
just from having
Commercial
that much
30,
more. Yeah,
Yep.
having that much more powder
Mhm.
room.
Yep.
But yeah, they're close. It's not far off. That jump of cutting it down that far short, and you don't lose a ton.
No.
in
And
doing that.
from the propellant technology available at the time, you look at powders like old school powders like IMR 3031, but IMR 4064. I mean, that is just the gold standard. Now it's Varget seems to be, but IMR 4064, 308 Winchester, 165, 150 grain match or hunting bullet. What more does a guy want?
Yeah.
So it probably saw, I would assume, relative instant success. Or do you guys think that because it was compared to the 30-06 and the 30-06 did kind of marginally edge it out, do you think it was instantly successful? Or do you think it was a slow burn like our 6.5 Creedmoor was?
There's probably a bunch of gun writers calling it a fad for 15 years or so.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about there's nothing new under the sun is if you look at a 308 Winchester, there's already cartridges like the 7.5 French, 7.5 Swiss that are, you almost couldn't tell them apart if you just looked at them.
Right.
So it's almost existing. Technology was already there, but it just needed a little bit of marketing to really set it off.
Okay.
I say besides the rim too, the 7.62 by 54, the body of those two cartridges is very similar in the performance. I mean, is comparable as well. I think the
Bullet
Russian
diameter.
one's quite a bit lower chamber pressure,
Mhm.
but
So commercially, it comes out. There's probably people calling it a fad at the time, but people are obviously knocking down animals and loving it. Now you get into the 60s, and we have some more military conflict. What did that cartridge look like use-wise on the ground in the 60s?
So as far as the early 60s, I mean, you still had the M14 was still in active service in the military. The type of fighting that was taking place in the 60s, where you're doing a lot of these anti-communism campaigns all over the world, where you see it in South Africa, the Rhodesia, was one where the type of fighting really was a lot of jungle-type warfare, and then the Americans in the mid-60s ended up in Vietnam, where when you have these big, long M14 battle rifles with a 22-inch long barrel and a wooden stock, just not ideal for jungle conditions.
Right. So, not ideal. Obviously, then you see the introduction of the 5.56, and that's used. Now, when we get into military sniping, that cartridge has almost become synonymous. When you think Marine Corps Scout Sniper, my mind goes to .308 Winchester, and maybe that's because of Carlos Hathcock or whatever, and it's just where my mind goes. Obviously, the military uses a bunch of different cartridges for their sniper applications, but when did the .308 kind of find its own in that world? Because, again, not super great for jungle warfare, and still today you see the M14, well, I say today, in my time in service, the M14, it was issued as a DMR type, had an optic on it and everything.
The M39, I think, right? Once they pulled them out and put them into a chassis and put a scope on.
Yeah, they were cool looking guns.
And I mean, we kept it as a light and medium machine gun round all the way through. I mean, it was still the M60 all the way through Vietnam, and then the M240. It's still being
still slinging them, which is great. As far as the sniper application goes, when did that really kick off? Or because you got to think the 30-06 had to be a shoe-in those early, Vietnam days.
Early M40s. The early M40s were 30-06 rifle model 70 Winchesters. They eventually did move on to the Remington 700 in the 7.62, and I think that's when it took off for the engagement length, distances you would find in that era. 7.62 more than adequate.
Right.
So, they kind of figured an 800 meter effective range, and that fit the bill, and that kind of stuck and stayed into the. And I don't know when with the M24 development, when was that?
M24 was the mid '80s. The Army used the M21, which is a scoped version of the M14. Clear up to the M4 or M24 replaced it.
Wow.
And that was also in 7.62.
Out here, you may only get one chance. So never compromise. At any distance. Match accurate ELDX bullets, highest BCs, flat trajectories, and unparalleled terminal performance at all practical ranges. Precision Hunter ammunition from Hornady.
You got to think that some of the efficiency of the cartridge helped play into its military use as a sniping round. When you look at the 30-06, you got that big, tall, skinny powder column, which is fine. But by going to the .308 Winchester or the 7.62 by 51 case size, you can go a little bit faster in your burn speed. You get into that 40-64 powder window, plus that case shape. It's just very efficient and versatile.
Yep.
You don't have to burn a ton of powder to get appreciable ballistics.
Yep, and I think it's not hard to get a .308 to shoot pretty well, especially like you said with the 40-64, 48-95, and now with like Varget, stuff like that. It's not a difficult cartridge to get to shoot well.
Right.
And so then you see, like the development between like match shooters and the sniping programs, you see the adoption of like the 168 and the 175 grain match bullets, and that extended the capability even further. Made it pretty like viable. Like we joke around that the 6.5 Creedmoor, blows the pants off of it, but it's. And it is an incremental improvement, but you still have a very effective cartridge there out to those distances, 800, maybe 1,000 meters, where, it's not, it's more, it's slower and it takes a while to get there, but it's still very effective at those distances.
Yep. I would say for the average field shooter, it's been said that, 800 meters is kind of the effective range. I would argue that you'd probably, for hit probability's sake, probably need to choke that up to maybe closer to 600, but it is effective at 800, and you can shoot it to 1,000. And there's been some even more modern advancements in bullets and propellant technology
and
that
rangefinders are probably the biggest thing. But once you have the ballistic calculators and the rangefinders that we got today, Yeah, it
Yeah.
extends the effective range of everything way further than it used to be.
Yeah. So, we're in 2023. We're rewinding the clock now 40 years to get to where the M24, like you said, was developed in the mid 80s. That's remarkable. What would that system look like for those listening that aren't familiar with that system?
So when you have the M24, you have a
Yeah.
Remington.
Or excuse me, I said
it's
M40.
Yep. M40 very similar. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the Marine version, which was a short action Remington 700. The M24 is a long action. The Army had big dreams of, we're going to develop this sniper rifle. It's going to be 30-06, but we could also make it a 300 Win Mag, or we could make it a 7.62. They settled on just doing the 7.62, and it was a big varmint contour barrel on there. Nice black HS precision stock. It's a great rifle. I had one for years. Eventually, kind of got tired of 308 and had to move it up to 300 PRC when that became a thing. But no, it's a great rifle to shoot. I don't think it's the best rifle to carry.
Right.
It's a 13-pound behemoth with a fixed 10-power loophole on top. That is just in 1987. I'm sure that was the cat's pajamas.
Yeah.
But,
Mil-dot reticle with MOA turret.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so again, you said the Marine Corps has a very similar M40 short action, still on the 700 platform.
Yep. That was a short action with a 25-inch barrel, and it had a Macmillan fiberglass stock on it.
Oh, nice.
And it had a couple advancements. I think they're up to A6, and then they finally changed calibers.
Yeah. Well, that's great, though, when you think about that in the 80s, there was that huge use case for the military sniping community, and then the law enforcement sniping community, I'm guessing, soon to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that fast forward several decades, and you're in 2023, and there are still people training in the military today, going through sniper school, shooting the 7.62 by 51.
Yeah. Well, that's like even mid 2000s when I got into long range shooting, like first started dabbling into it. That was what you did. You got a 308. I mean, there was guys that were shooting 260s and whatever else, like custom stuff, but it wasn't near as prevalent as it is now. And the Creedmoor really kind of blew up the whole 6.5 and then later the 6 craze for the match shooters. But 308 was like the go-to long range cartridge. There was tons of ballistic info out there if you used standard bullets and whatever. Like there was a lot of information out there. That was kind of the easy button, was to get started with a 308. And so I think that was the first centerfire cartridge I ever fired. Was
Really?
Yeah. First deer was taken with a 308, and first centerfire cartridge, and then my first match gun was built up in a 308.
Well, and for me personally, like I alluded to at the beginning, my first long range shot was with my dad's 308 Winchester and a milk jug in a hayfield, and I could take you to the hayfield right now and remember what direction we were facing and everything. And at the time, it was just something that was really cool, but I didn't know that it would spur kind of this passion for long range that by the time I was able to get into competitive shooting, field style PRS was kind of right at the beginning of PRS, but field style matches, it wasn't even a second thought. I'm building a gun. I'm building a 308 Winchester.
Right.
And the 6.5 Creedmoor had already been around for a few years at that point, but I still built a 308 Winchester, and I'm glad that I did because it has a little more recoil than some of the the new 6.5s and 6s. A lot of those fundamentals, you really have to apply them.
Yeah.
The follow through, the trigger control, really have to apply those to make good impacts at range. And 1 in 10 twists. And I'll tell you what, the 168 grain and 175/178 grain bullets. If you've got a match bullet in one of those two weight categories, and Varget or IMR 4064, 4895, even IMR 3031, more traditional. Shooter's World Precision is another really popular one. If you can't get your gun to shoot with those combinations, it's broken.
Right.
Because that just simply works. And Matt, I know you see this in the lab every day. We're pumping out ammo as fast as we can with as high of a quality as we can. We're loading 308 Winchester around the clock in a variety of SKUs. And one of those staples that just seems to be running all the time, whenever I check the production schedule, 168 grain, whether that be Boattail Hollow Point or ELD Match or something along those lines, it's just always running. And speak to us a little bit about, obviously you've been in the lab for a long time. You've seen a ton of rounds come through. It seems like press operator sets up the press, hits the go button, and the stuff just plain shoots. Pressure, velocity, accuracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we never fight the 308. It seems like it's one of those easy button type cartridges to load. It doesn't matter what bullet we're loading. If you're doing the 150 grain spire point, clear up to the 168 grain match load, it's just as easy to get the thing to shoot. We never really have any issues with the excessive pressure. I mean, we run that thing pretty moderate.
Modest,
we have no trouble getting velocity spec. And industry spec velocity, we don't load them light. We're right up there with everybody else, getting the performance we can out of them, and they just shoot. Barrel life on them is great.
Mm-hmm.
We don't fight the 308s. It's nice.
So years ago, Hornady had a underground ballistics labs. We still do, and it did pressure and velocity testing down there, and also accuracy testing. Right now, it's exclusively used for accuracy testing. And when you were down there, I remember, you might not know this, and I'm sorry to just bring this on you. I remember early on in my career at Hornady, there was a 308 Winchester barrel that was basically a hollow tube. Like you guys kept it around out of novelty, and it just shot lights out.
That was the nice thing about those. Yeah, we had one that just sat on the wall. We didn't even put it away in the drawers with what we would consider a good barrel.
Mm-hmm.
It would get to be that if we had our normal production barrels and we couldn't get a bullet to shoot, we'd pull that one off the wall and shoot it.
Just to acid check,
just to
the
try
barrel
it.
or the bullet.
And every once in a while, it would pull it off.
That's awesome.
We would get some groups out of that thing.
Yeah, and I don't remember the round count, but it was 5 digits. I mean, it's 10 or 11, 12,000 rounds or something.
It's not hard to put a lot of rounds on an accuracy barrel.
Yeah,
just testing bullets all day long, but they come around. I mean, they seem like they start to shoot and they don't quit until they're done.
Yeah, that's awesome. And now, obviously, we have way more tight round counts on our barrels. Typically, even on a 308 Winchester, we'll pull that thing between 1,000, maybe 1,200 rounds or something.
Yeah.
But that was really cool. I just, you put a bore scope in there, and there was just like, where there was supposed to be rifling, there was only a ghost town of what used to be rifling. Yep. And then halfway down the barrel, it'd pick back up.
As far as precision testing, you can get away with that. You can have a high round count barrel that still shoots. We can't do that with a pressure and velocity barrel,
right?
Because it's stuck to those tolerances it has to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
But accuracy barrel, when you get a good one, you keep it, you hang on to it.
Yeah, and that just goes to say, I mean, you want to get a practice cartridge to learn long range, and it has such the history. And like I said, when I was growing up, that was the round. Like, oh my gosh, I don't know what they put inside it to make it so awesome, but it's just amazing. Yep. And then you learn more about ballistics and you kind of develop a little bit better thought of what it actually is. But it's so amazing. You get that cartridge, you build a gun in it, then you can put thousands of rounds of training on it.
Yeah, you can get, reliably 5,000 to 8,000 rounds of accurate barrel life on a 308. And it is great because you got lower BC bullets compared to like the 6s and the 6.5s, and you got lower velocity and you got more recoil. So as far as a trainer and teaching you to handle recoil, read the wind, get your range estimation, or get verify dope and stuff like that, it's an excellent trainer because it is it'll still get there, but it's a little bit harder, and it forces you to really dial in your skills, to make it consistent hits, at those really long distances. That for a 6 or a 6.5 is like, just kind of plug and play. This takes a little bit more thought.
Right.
And if you can do it with a 308, then you can really hammer it down when you go back to a 6.5 or a 6mm.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people in our space that train with the 308.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have a 22 trainer and or a 308 trainer, and then their match rifle. And that kind of leads us into a good point here. So we talked mainly about the development of the 308 Winchester 7.62x51 and kind of its military use. Obviously, the machine guns are one thing, but it's kind of its precision aspect, with the sniping community and the law enforcement sniping community, which is still widely popular there as well. Kind of the next aspect of its life is match shooting. Because you've seen 308 Winchester national matches, Palma, FTR. PRS has a specific division for it.
Right.
It's kind of a prolific match cartridge. Do you guys think, or maybe some history on it, when it started to really get adopted into those match circles?
I would assume it started with military high power.
Yeah. I was gonna say 50s, 60s, sometime in there.
Whenever these teams would stop shooting the M1 and move on to the M14, that's when that would really take off. And as soon as you got these guys shooting an M14, you're not going to want to shoot an M1 anymore.
Then
So, Yep.
So this is just a progressive
Yep.
cycle.
And all through the 90s, you had the M14 was dominating high power. Everybody at Camp Perry shooting an M1A or an M14, right up till the 5.56 took off, and then everybody saw the benefit of the lower recoil.
Sure. Yeah, but in the 90s, the matches that went on at Camp Perry, that was a huge time, and in the early 2000s even huge time for those specific type of sports. In the 308, like you said, people just loved it. And the 168 grain match bullets that are available that were popular or still are popular, they buck the wind really well, moderate recoil for the cartridge, and they just plumb shoot. Well, I don't know, we said it a bunch of times, but my gosh, 168 grain match bullet of any variety in a 308, and it's probably going to do pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I actually shot at Camp Perry with a match M1A, and I did terribly. You got the guys that you have the real true competitors. They want to win. They're shooting a 5.56. You have the guys that just want to have fun, beat themselves up a little bit. They're out there with an M14.
Yeah,
and that was me. Yep.
Well, our senior ballistic scientist Dave Emery, I know he was big into the matches at Camp Perry, and you go into his office and he had a lot of awards on display. I don't know if he ever shot 308s, but I would assume with his background that he would probably
he shot either an M1A or an M1 Garand, but he made the President's 100 with a 30 caliber.
Yeah.
So that's pretty distinguished.
Yeah, pretty okay shot, pretty okay competitor. So then you see Palma, for example, or FTR, where it's basically exclusively 308 Winchester.
Right.
And for a lot of those same reasons that we've already talked about, just efficient. You don't have to, the type of powder, there's a bunch of them on the market that just simply work well, the quality of the match bullets, and they would go exceptionally long barrels just to get the added velocity. If you start putting added barrel length on the 308 Winchester, you're right there with the 30-06, even with today's standards and modern propellants.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like.
Yeah. Yeah, you add that extra barrel length. That's
free
the only way. Yeah, the only way to get free velocity, really.
Yeah. We used to load a Palma match load.
The 8095 PM.
Yep, you remember the part number.
There. Yep, we loaded that quite a bit. We loaded that for the Palma matches, and they shot it in one of the international matches, and then we added that to our product lineup. It was pretty popular for the bolt guns. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was 155 grain bullets, kind of. Yep. I think it's what you have to use.
Yep, you have to use 155 grain.
I'm familiar with Palma.
Yep. Palma, I think it has to be a 308. I don't know when they stopped using 30-06, but they required 308. 155 grain bullet, and I think at the time it was an SMK, but we came on board and we loaded some AMAX ammo, 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yep.
And that was great ammo. I had some in my early career when I still shooting 308 Winchester, and that stuff straight shot. I opted personally to go with the 178 grain bullet just to get a little bit better in the wind, but that Palma Match Factory ammo, that was good stuff. Outstanding. So Palma, FTR, obviously, that's popular. I doubt there's anybody shooting it in straight up F class, but FTR, obviously, it's popular there. And then now you see Precision Rifle Series, back when NRL was still doing the 2-day, field style matches. They have a complete division
right,
just for what they call tactical, which is 223 and 308 Winchester. And I'll tell you what, the nut behind the bolt is always the most critical factor. And there are some people shooting tactical with 308 Winchester that shoot and beat a lot of people that are shooting the 6s and the 6.5s.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you've seen it.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's the shooter's more important than the cartridge in a lot of up to a certain point in a lot of respects. And like we said, the 308 will still definitely make it to all those distances that we're still shooting at.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty impressive too to me, like the range of bullet weights that you can put into a 30 caliber, and the 308's no exception there. I mean, you got everything down from around 100 grains up to over 200, 220. I mean, you start really choking the 308, and you get really, really slow velocity at that point. But
right.
Yeah, effectively you can use 110 to 180, or even up to around 200 grains, especially if you throw them out a little bit and get the bullet out of the case. I mean, you got a really wide range of application just on. So if you want to go shoot prairie dogs or coyotes or deer, all the way up to a lot of the bigger game, the 308 will still handle it.
That's awesome. Well, and that kind of shifts gears into kind of the third portion, if you will, of the 308 Winchester. You have its development. You have the military aspect, the sniping community. You have it used in matches, And then what it's probably used most for today is just hunting in North America or hunting anywhere in the world. And like you said, you've got these huge variety of bullets. And again, for me personally, I had that .308 Winchester that I built right out of the gate to start competing with. And I shot 178 grain bullets. Well, I had a load using benchmark powder from Hodgdon and our 110 grain VMAX that just shot bullet on top of bullet on top of bullet as many times as you wanted to pull the trigger. Flat based, and I never shot any prairie dogs with it. That was always my intention, was to go out and shoot a coyote or shoot prairie dogs with it.
Yeah.
But it was at super fast considering such a light bullet.
Right.
Just did phenomenal. I love that little 110 grain bullet, no recoil. That was great. And then likewise, shot all the way up to 178 grain bullets. Well, for the hunter, there is, like you mentioned, the sky is the limit.
Yeah. Yeah. You got the varmint stuff if you want to shoot small game. Might be a little much for coyotes if you're trying to keep fur, but it seems like nobody's buying lately.
I don't feel like that's nobody cares anymore.
Yeah,
as far as coyotes
but
go.
yeah, if you just want them gone, it'll sure put them down. And then hogs, deer, elk, even. I mean, there's you could probably go bigger too if you have the right bullet.
Yeah,
and you limit your shot window so that it makes sense to what you're doing. But yeah,
get into the reloading red zone with reloading tools from Hornady. Innovation, craftsmanship, and reliability. Hornady reloading presses are built with American pride and backed by our legendary no-risk warranty. Hand load precision with tools from Hornady.
Let's talk a little bit about the ammos that we have to offer, because again, we talked about the match ammo. Now in a hunting world, Matt, from going through the lab, you see every SKU that's running. It comes through the lab. What do you see from a bullet weight standpoint? And the reason I ask that is our production schedule is demand driven. So if there's a huge back order demand for a given bullet weight, we run that a little more often. So I kind of use that as a gauge to what people in the field are actually using. So from a bullet weight standpoint, where do you see the 308 really thriving today?
Number one is definitely going to be the 150 grain Spire Point. Is that's the load for 308 that everybody's buying. It's always selling. You have seasonal matches. Number two would be the 168 grain ELDM.
Yeah,
that's a great one too. But that 150 grain bowtail, or not bowtail, flat base Spire Point is always selling.
Yeah,
and that's huge. That American whitetail load, everybody loves it. Everybody buys it. It's so versatile. Yeah, you can do anything with it.
And I think that's neat to see. Fast forward from 1949, 74 years later, the 150 grain flat base Spire Point, which started the company, 7 decades and change ago, is still being used in one of our most popular cartridges. It's one of our most popular individual bullets in that cartridge.
I'm sure it's probably similar with a 30-06 as well, that same bullet.
Yeah, 30-06, 150 grain bullet. I mean, it's
really, I would have thought the 30-06 would be a 165.
You would think a heavier bullet, but I don't know if it's just so deep in tradition. That's what everybody likes. That's what everybody wants. But it's a great load. I mean, it's a great whitetail load.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to go a little heavier if you're going to shoot an elk or something a larger size, but it'll get it done. I mean, it's a great bullet. It's even good to shoot. I mean, I would rather shoot a Spire Point than a Full Metal Jacket. Just you get a little bit more accuracy, and just you have it on hand for whatever might come.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and yeah, the 150 grain bullet in a 308, you get all the velocity that the 308 should be getting because it's a little bit lighter bullet, and then super easy to be accurate.
That's the weight range it was designed for.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, yeah, exactly. That's it really fits. And then the versatility that we talked about. Man, you want to talk about versatility. Wow. 165 grain bullets. Okay. Super. You can handle those no problem for hunting. That kind of opens you up a little bit. Going to get a little bit more BC over 150 grain bullets. So for, plains game like, antelope or mule deer where the shot distances tend to be a little bit further, you got that option. And you can bump up even further to 178 grain bullet, which for me, I really thought the 308 in the world of precision really thrived with that weight class because you still got appreciable velocity. Most 24-inch barrels are going to run a 178 grain bullet right at 2,600 feet per second. So you got plenty of velocity to make the bullets work. And then you get a really efficient bullet for as light as it is. Those 178 ELDXs in our precision hunter load. If you're out there African Plains game, it'd be a great load option. Same thing with the American, hunting the West, where you're shooting maybe across a canyon. That's just awesome. And then you shift it into overdrive. If you're a hand loader, you've got 180 grain bullets. You've got 200 grain bullets. You've got a 220 grain round nose. If you're really into being a traditionalist, you really have such a wide variety of options there. And then that last and final gear in the world of hunting, introduce new bullet technology. You were going to use 150 grain interlock for whitetail. Well, now you've got 150 or 165 grain bullet that you can use on elk with our CX.
Mm-hmm.
Really expanded the versatility there, and you really don't sacrifice anything going to the monolithic bullet.
You really don't, and not so much in the lab we work in now, developing ammo. We used to work in the bullet lab, and that's where I would test every new lot of the GMX bullets. We'd have to test for expansion, and that's just incredible seeing how those expand and how they hold up, the weight retention, the penetration on them. It's always been just kind of amazing. We would shoot spire points, we'd shoot SSTs, and those are designed, to deform, and you're going to lose some weight. You're going to lose some lead, you're going to lose some, bits of jacket, but that GMX, you get 99%, retention on your weight for most part. But because the bullets are light for length, they're kind of light, but you don't lose any penetration.
You gain penetration in a lot of cases.
Yeah. A lot of people think a lighter bullet, you're going to get less penetration, but that's not true with the GMX.
Yeah, and now the CX.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the CX, yeah.
Yeah,
yep,
yeah, and the CX, you mentioned doing the testing on what at the time was the GMX.
Mm-hmm.
That still goes on. We still test our CX bullets for expansion on every new lot at a high velocity and a low velocity. Depending on the caliber, the high velocity changes, but the low velocity is usually right around 2,000 to 2,100 feet per second of impact speed. So those get tested all the time. And like you said, they're light for their length, and generally they're light for caliber. But because of their material, you get all the weight retention, you get all the penetration, and it really adds just another value to a given cartridge. And in this case, the .308 Winchester. Now it's that much more capable of the bigger game, like elk or eland or kudu or some of those zebra, for example, on the African plains. You can literally take this thing anywhere in the world, and that's another thing in the hunting aspects. There's .308 Winchester ammo everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't think you could probably find a place that sells ammunition anywhere in the world that won't have a shelf space for .308.
I would assume every company that makes ammunition, every government arsenal across the world, makes 7.62 NATO or .308 Winchester.
Yeah, it really adds to its value. There should be a spot in every gun safe for a .308 Winchester, because you very likely will never have a time where there isn't ammo being produced for that cartridge. And then you throw in the versatility, and it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I would say this: it is not antiquated. With all the new stuff and all the cartridges that we're releasing too. We have 6.5 Creedmoor is probably the one that gets the most talk in comparison to the .308, and it certainly is edging it out in performance in a lot of areas. But the .308 is still just as valid today, I think, as it was ever.
Yeah. It's definitely the jack of all trades of the short action standard bolt face cartridges. I mean, you shift things around a little bit, with bullet weights or whatever, but there's things that a .308 can do that a 6.5 just can't, just because you can't get enough bullet in there in a 6.5 diameter.
Yep. So super versatile. That's a great way to put it, Miles. The jack of all trades for the short action cartridges.
Mm-hmm.
That is worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're spanning, 70 some years, right, of performance,
right,
and versatility, and it's standing on its own two legs. There's no marketing machine propping this up. It's popular for a reason. Every gun out there seems to, you can buy pretty much any rifle chambered in a .308 Winchester, and I think that's a testament to its versatility. Use it for matches, use it for sniping, use it for hunting, use it for all of them. Great option out there.
Yep.
Well, guys, is there anything else that you would like our listener to take away from this podcast, focused specifically on the .308 Winchester? Any closing statements?
No, other than what you already said, is it's not going away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's here to stay. It's established. Probably everybody in here has a .308 Winchester, has had a .308 Winchester, and
or 5 or 6
or 5, yeah, 2.
Yeah. Awesome. Miles, anything else?
I think we covered most of it. Yeah, it ain't going nowhere.
Right.
It's a solid cartridge.
You heard it here first. 6.5 Creedmoor, America's cartridge. No, the 308, a soft spot for all of us. I mean, I think all of us have, since we're all similar in age, we have that vision of what the 308, the way we perceived it in the time frame where we grew up, where it's just accurate, it's efficient, it's all the snipers use it, it's got to be great for long range, and it does a lot of things well. And there's probably no better compliment than that.
Yeah.
That it does a lot of things really well.
Yep. And I think no matter, even if there are better long-range match cartridges available today, the 0 to 300 yard hunting world that is most of what happens in North America, probably all over the place, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
It's still the energy delivery that you get out of the 308. You can, get in the same ballpark, but they're not like a clear, like, oh yeah, this is obviously better. I mean, it's, out of a short action cartridge, other than going to the PRCs or the short mags or something like that. I mean, it's doing it, and it's doing it well. You're gonna take anything from small to big game, no problem with that cartridge.
Yeah, awesome. Well, the 308 Winchester, not going anywhere, incredibly versatile, one that we're loading thousands upon thousands upon thousands of rounds of ammunition in a given day. That stuff is as in demand as it ever was. And I appreciate you guys taking some time and talking the 308 Winchester today. I know we didn't really have a game plan. We were just talking 308, but I appreciate you guys coming on the show.
Yeah,
No problem. This is good.
Awesome. Well, we'll have you guys back on the show. Guys, hopefully you enjoyed this podcast on 308 Day. The 308 Winchester, still a veritable force to be reckoned with in the hunting world, the sniping world, and the match world. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you on the next one.